How are you doing today, Sammetria?
Good. How are you doing, Ezra?
I am doing well. I obviously know who you are because you're my lawyer who I love and adore. And we crossed paths. Like, I can't even remember like the title of the event, which is crazy because at the time it was such a super cool event and that was all I could think of. But I remember it was in Dallas. It was
Yes.
at Spaces and it was with Dallas Startup Week.
Hmm.
And so you were like just introducing yourself, and I think even Clover may have known you before, or someone that we knew before, and you passed out your card, and I was like, okay, we asked you a little bit more about yourself. You told me, I was like, okay, and I was like in my head, I'm gonna keep this person in the back of my mind. Then at least a year later, I was like, I need a lawyer, and you were the first person that I called.
It's funny. I think that was a relatively short time ago, but with this COVID situation, it seems like 5 years ago. But it was,
Right.
that was like less than 5 years ago. It was, I think, maybe a year at most. But
Right,
it
right.
seems like forever.
So true. Facts. So tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do, and we will go from there.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for the invitation to uh, share with you today, to visit with you today. So, my name is Sammetria Goodson. I am an attorney with my own firm that's based in the DFW area, Goodson Law PLLC. And what we do at Goodson Law is we represent creatives broadly speaking. These are like multi hyphenates, polymaths, people who are in just creative industries. And what we do is we help them to set a firm foundation for their creative businesses. We help them protect their intellectual property. And then if push comes to shove, we help them to resolve any sort of disputes. And we also help creatives monetize their creativity. So it is my great pleasure to practice within the areas of art law, fashion law, business law, as well as intellectual property. We don't typically get into things like trust and estates, so there's some other areas of law that we don't touch from a civil perspective, like tax law. But we work with creatives to just help get them the resources they need should they need those other legal services as well. So yeah, I have been practicing law for a while now. I was looking like, when did I graduate? Practicing law for a while. I went to undergrad at the University of Texas at Austin, where I double majored in business in the Macomb School of Business, as well as art history in the College of Fine Arts. And then from there, I worked in corporate America for a little bit and decided to go to law school to practice art law. And at the time, I was living in Philadelphia, which is the location of my second office that I opened up at the beginning of March of this year with everybody else who had plans in before COVID kicked off. I was one of the same. I was in the same boat. But yeah, I was living in Philly and had been living on the East Coast for a while. And yeah, I decided to go to law school to practice art law as I knew it at the time because I spent a lot of time around artists and creatives. And I was doing some pro bono work for them from a business perspective, just helping
Mhm.
to get their books together, helping to provide a little bit of structure around what they were doing from a financial standpoint. But what I kept running into, Ezra, is that people, the things that would take out the companies, right? The things that would cause people to shut down their shops or really not allow them to be able to scale their businesses or build sustainable creative or pursue their creativity in a sustainable manner was legal issues. And so
Mhm.
I went to Temple Law to practice art law. When I got there, it wasn't really a practice area that is as well known as it is now. And even at that time, there were only, I didn't run into that many lawyers that even practice fashion law. But yeah, so I went anyway. And
That
as
is
as
crazy to
you
me because
were, yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
because I mean, when you think about like the fashion industry in general, like it's $1 billion industry. So the fact
yep.
that you can run into many like that's like dumbfounded to me. But I also know like the history of the fashion industry and just the creative industries. And while at some point in time it was kind of like the wild wild west, and people were doing a lot of handshake deals. So
Mhm.
that does make sense to me. Um, but the fact that you were able to find like your specific niche of what you wanted to do and like hey, like I see that there's room for growth. There's an area of opportunity. and that you started really like heavily pursuing it, and the fact that it was kind of natural for you because you were already in that environment, I think is super, super awesome. Um,
Yeah, yeah. There were some attorneys that worked for like some of the major fashion houses, like in house.
mhm.
But in terms of like fashion law, in terms of what that is now as a complete fashion, as a complete practice area, rather, it's just
Right,
completely different than when I went to law school. So it's very encouraging. But yes, there's a lot more going on. I think that with the power of the internet, the power of technology. There's so many people who could do so many things. I mean, you could launch a line in a way now that you couldn't even 10 years ago.
right.
And with that, of course, with all that opportunity comes risk. And so that's where I come in. I help manage risk. So people will say, well, what do you so like explain what you do in a nutshell? It's like I help manage and mitigate risk. That's what I do on a
Right.
daily
Yeah, and what I love the best about the practice, because you know what you said, from the terms of like basically before we ever get to civil court and before we ever get into the court, you're about like trying to prevent that from happening and occurring so that we don't get to that space where we're, you know, arguing in front of a judge and we're having to prove like this and that. Like it's like, let's cut all that out before we ever have to go through that. Let's get some structure underneath us.
Yeah.
And that's what I love the most about what you do for me personally, but also for, you know, creatives as well. And what you do for like, you know, like I said, my business personally, but you know, just in general, because I think that's really amazing. The fact that we have someone that is my personal shiro, you know, like that I can call him like, hey, um, which now that I think about it, that does remind me of something that when you come back from, you know, your official vacation that I need to talk to you about. Um, but yeah, so how did you just decide that this is like I mean, obviously I mean, maybe you were a little girl and you're like, this is what I want to do. Like, but how did you like fall into it, and what are some of the challenges that you've managed to overcome in your duration and in your tenure with not only helping others but in your own business and practice?
Yeah, yeah. I think well, when I told I will say that I didn't grow up wanting to be an attorney. But when I announced to my family I was going to law school, they were like, okay, well, we knew that was going to happen. So either I did say that when I was a little kid, or I just like to argue with people. And so they just thought it was a natural fit. But my love affair with art specifically and creativity started with my mom taking me to museums in Houston, which is where I grew up. And, it was a very simple thing in that it seems like in my child's mind, right, that she took every opportunity to make sure that my brother and I were in museums, that we were exposed to culture in so many different ways.
Right.
And I mean, we could just have an entire segment where I just talk about all the cool things my mom found for us to do, most of them for free. But yeah, it started there, right, with this idea that you can communicate. It's visual communication, that
Right.
you can get across like how you feel, or you can get across your message, or you have something to say, or your voice can come through something like art and something like creativity. I think that is what I took with me when I went to UT, in that I was in the business school first and I was studying, marketing, which is one of the most creative of the business disciplines. It's not finance, it's not management, it's not what was known as management information systems back then when I'm like dating myself, but yeah, MIS. It wasn't any of those things. It wasn't accounting. Marketing is the most creative of the business disciplines. And then in the School of Art, I was in art history. It's the most cerebral. It's not sculpture. It's not 3D design. It's not, works on paper. So my path was very circular. I went in a direction of what I loved,
Right.
and ended up studying art history, which is also visual communication, just from a different perspective
Like
as
that, right.
marketing. Um, Now, where law school came in is what I said before. I just found that I was working with creatives, and the thing that would take them out, the thing that would halt their dreams, would be legal issues, and so that's what kind of sent me to law school. Minus, I guess, my aptitude from it, which was expressed as a child growing up. but but in terms of like just the path, and even when I got to Temple, I had great professors at Temple. They steered me in the direction of intellectual property, and I fell in love with it, right? Because intellectual property is the legal system that protects creativity. That's how I saw it at the time and how
Right.
I still see it. And so I just kind of like went in that direction. And because my path just wasn't as illuminated as some of my law school peers, like the ones who wanted to work in the big law firms or the ones who wanted to do, you know, trust and estates, or the ones who just had paths that were a little bit clearer, they were kind of funneled into whatever that path was. For me, I just
Right.
had to work to find opportunities. So, for instance, I worked for the Philadelphia Law Department, which is on the civil side, and I was in the real estate department, as an intern. The real estate department happened to represent the art commission of the city of Philadelphia.
That's
Amazing. So it
crazy.
was one of the best internships ever. So I just kind of found little situations like that. I went out to Nashville one summer for, I think it was a little bit more than a month of a summer in law school. I worked for a record company in Nashville, and that was an unpaid internship. And I paid for it by serving as a virtual research assistant for one of my IP professors back in Philadelphia. And we were researching international law, right? So again, the power of technology, you could do these things from your laptop or from your computer. So yeah, I just look for opportunities to go into the flow of what I was interested in. But the main thing that I had to do, Ezra, was to focus on what I cared about.
Right.
And that can be very distracting in a law school environment where, or any environment really, where you have people going in the direction that everyone else is going in.
Mhm.
And that direction may have all sorts of like monetary, financial benefits. It has all the prestige and all of those things. I just tried to stay true to, you know, what I was interested in. Now I was able to do that because I worked in corporate America for 3 years before I went to law school. So I knew it, and I had an amazing job, right? So I knew when
Right.
I walked away from that job, that's what I was walking away from. And so it helped me kind of stay on the path of what I was really interested in. And from there, you know, once I graduated, I focused on skill set, right? So I had some opportunities that just came to me because frankly, because I just went to an amazing school and had professors who were looking out for me and a dean who was looking out for me. And I'd done well in law school as well. So you have to be prepared. Preparation meets the opportunity.
Right.
um, but yeah, I focused on skills. So I clerked for a judge for 2 years after graduating. So I was in Philadelphia, worked for an amazing judge who's one half of a judicial powerhouse couple. It's the Judges Tucker in Philadelphia, and they were just such mentors to me. So I was a judge's attorney for 2 years. An incredible opportunity, an incredible blessing, not just the clerkship, but the specific judge. And the time that we were on the bench, and I was on the bench with His Honor, was a very specific time. So that was an opportunity that just came. It was for me, right? And it was
Right.
amazing. But it wasn't on the path of like fashion law, art law, not directly. It
Right.
was, oh, here's something that's incredible. You're gonna at minimum gain some amazing skills as a lawyer. So do that.
Right.
And that's what I did. But the whole time I was keeping tabs in terms of what was going on in the market, what was happening in the world of cultural property and art and fashion and creative industries and all of that, just kind of keeping tabs on what was going on. Then I decided to move back home to Texas, as Texans do. Somehow we tend to mosey back at some point. But I moved back home to Texas in 2013, and I focused on skill sets. So I knew I wanted to get trial experience. So I actually did personal injury law for about 2.5 years before I got to where I am now, because I knew that if I wanted to be an attorney that wrote really good contracts, right? If I knew at some point that I was going to be a transactional attorney, I would benefit from knowing what it's like actually having to try a case in front of a jury, get evidence together, and know what that trajectory looks like from beginning to end.
Right.
And so we say it's from soup to nut. It's from pre-litigation all the way to jury verdict. Like to go that entire path, that was important to me. So I got plenty of trial experience, did a lot of depositions, wrote a lot of motions, did all that kind of stuff. But it was focused on skill sets, thinking forward. Okay, I'm interested in certain areas of law, but at the end of the day, there's practice areas and then there's like practical skills. So let me continue to develop these skill sets. After I worked with that firm, I worked for a small firm who was kind of in the same space, but they had a different approach. And you know, I decided that it would be best for me to work on my own, and I started my own firm. And the opportunity presented itself for me to do that, as it happens sometimes. That happens. And so, yeah, I started my own firm and I knew from the beginning what I wanted to focus on. And so far, the biggest challenge has been just staying focused because when you're first starting out, it's like any business where you're trying to provide a service, but you have expenses and things that you need to pay for to even get up and running. And so there's always a temptation of like, oh, well, can you just take this one case? I know, you're a really good trial attorney, or I know you can do pre-litigation. Can you take this one case? It'll pay, you're looking at opportunities that are coming to you that may not necessarily be in what you're interested in. And so
Right.
for me, that's like family law, it's criminal law, it's all the areas of law that I don't practice in. I have colleagues that practice in those areas, but when you're getting started, the temptation is to just do some things to keep afloat. But I said, no, I've been down this road before. I know how this is going to end. The moment I do that is the moment I get off path. And so I just
Right.
stay focused. And so whatever sacrifices I had to make, whatever I had to do or not do to get the resources, that's what I did. And I just have a passion for it. Right now, I would say another challenge was getting a team. So as I expanded, I ended up bringing on an assistant and bringing on a paralegal, and really just thinking about the type of clients I wanted to work with and the types of projects that I wanted to work on. And so we've done a lot of streamlining. We've done a lot of process building. I've retooled some of my policies, and I've thought hard about the people I want to work with. So I'm at the point now where I can do a consultation and ask some questions of a potential client and decide, I don't think we'll be a good match. And
Right.
so, and so I can refer them on down the road and I can keep focused on not just the areas of practice that I want to work on, but also the type of clients that I want to serve. And that is just my great pleasure. So a potentially long-winded answer to your question, but I was trying to hit, the road bumps, speed bumps, and just opportunities for off ramps. There have been plenty.
Right.
But it's just staying focused on what you love and staying focused on what you're passionate about because there's a
What
lane.
what keeps you like focused and motivated? Because obviously, like, I mean, it's clear that you're passionate about what it is that you do. That is one so big for me, just because I mean, we've already had conversations where very big on energy and very big on the sense of representation of how people present themselves and their how they value other people. And I know that you, as an individual, believe strongly and heavily in sharing value with other individuals and making sure that not only are you providing a service, that they're getting something from it, and that they're actually being truly served from the beginning to the end process of it. So what continues to keep you motivated through all of the challenges, through those times where you may have had difficulties, where it's like, okay, well, I know that from a human perspective, I've got this bill to pay, and someone is dangling this opportunity that is not in my pathway, but it would pay this bill, like.
Mhm.
So what kept you motivated to continue on your pathway?
The thing that I think about um, often, and I call it, I have different like motivators that I just keep in my back pocket, if you will. So those days where I'm like, ugh, I'm like, okay, let me play the motivation card on myself. So one of the things that I think about often are the stories and cases that I would see as a law clerk, where
Mhm.
you had people who were musicians, people in the entertainment industry who at the end of their the beginning of their old age, maybe end of their lives, they were in court arguing over things like trademark and contracts and royalties and all this other stuff.
Right.
And there was I mean a couple cases even where there were some injunctions, and I mean it was just full of drama, like TV drama, in terms of these issues. And I just remember looking at all the paperwork and then and going to the hearings, and I'm seeing these people, particularly people of color, who obviously did not have access to proper legal representation at the time. And way back when, right, when they
Right.
were in the prime of their entertainment careers as musicians, singers, whatever it is, if they had someone there who could just say, okay, on page 4 of this contract, paragraph 15 says you are relinquishing all your rights to everything and you're not going to get a dime no matter what you say. If somebody would have said that one thing, to these gentlemen then who are in their, I mean, they're my elders, right? They're older
Right.
age now. It would have made such a difference. And I'm sitting there looking at those things happening, right in front of me in the form of just me being a law clerk and seeing the type of cases that came through um, my judge's court. And beyond that, just understanding that for certain communities, and they're the communities that tend to happen to have a high concentration of clients, BIPOC communities, represent a lot of female founders, women-led companies, and folks who are creatives. Those are the people that often are the ones that get taken advantage of. And that is what keeps me motivated. Even in this midst of like the response to Black Lives Matter, in the context of these major retailers that are suddenly like, oh, wait a minute, we don't have any Black designers. Okay, well, we should find some. Even in the midst of that, Ezra, this year, like in the past 4 months, I've seen contracts come from major retailers. And I'm looking at the terms and I'm comparing those contracts with other people that I represent, because I represent everybody. And I'm
Right.
looking at retailers, the same retailer give different terms to different artists based on what they think the perceived value is for that artist. I'm getting excited, so my headphone fell out. And so those are the things that motivate me. Just the disparity, some things that I see in terms that I would consider to be discriminatory behavior, the inequities that are built into things such as simple as contract negotiations, and just the knowledge that for many communities, intellectual property, creativity, those things have major value for companies.
Right.
They have major value for brands. And oftentimes the people who are creating that value are not the ones who are benefiting from the value creation from a monetary standpoint. They may get a lot of exposure. But in terms of the value of creativity and what people bring to brands and just the disparity between the compensation, that is a very specific motivating factor for me. I say to myself, not on my watch. I cannot in 2020 sit as an IP attorney, a woman and a person of color, and sit and not participate in or try to positively impact and move the needle, at least on things as simple as licensing agreements, right? Or making sure that if you have royalties, that the royalties are protected off in their own LLC, like an IP holding company. There's so many type of legal tools that can be used to even protect what you fought for. After you get the thing that you were fighting for, now let's protect it against the risk associated with everything else that you're doing. And so those are the main motivating factors. It's just not on my watch. It cannot be said that at this point in 2020, with where we are, with our access to knowledge, that the things that happen to people that came way before us continue to happen. And so in my little corner of the world, that's what I'm fighting for. Yeah, it's a motivating factor. And I like negotiating contracts. I like it. I love asking for things and having the other party say, well, we've never done that before. It's like, oh, well, you never worked with a designer with this many followers. And we're in a different world now. So This is what we're doing. Oh, and by the way, your company just was just sued on racial discrimination like last week. So we know why you're contacting my client. So, let's see what we can work out. And so that's motivating, to be in that position, to be able to move the needle, sometimes advancing the ball way down. I don't want to start with football. I'm not a football, but you know what I mean? Like, you can move the needle on some things, but other things you can advance way down the field. And so on a daily basis, that's what I get to do. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a great part too of like why we connect, is because it's like I feel like we're different parts of doing the same type of work. Like so that's what I love the most about you as an individual, the fact that you are so like dedicated to not only your clients but like a mission that is beyond like yourself, that really is about helping other individuals and seeing other individuals succeed. So that is one of the things that I love the most about you as an individual, and of course your practice, Goodson Law. So
No, I appreciate that. I'm glad it translates. I mean, my motto is we help people do good work. Because you
Right.
can do evil stuff, but we want to do good work. You can do things that harm other people, but we want to create opportunity. We want to value and put a, value and properly be compensated for what we do. And that in and of itself creates opportunity. Because if you as a designer, you in the fashion industry, if you launch a line or whatever you're doing within the industry, whatever input you are in the fashion industry, if you have a firm foundation, you can then grow and employ other people. You can provide internships to other people. You now create your own ecosystem. Yeah, that I love that, right? I'm super passionate about that. I have clients that they started with me when I filed the LLC documents and then we're
Right.
looking down the line later. And it's like, oh, but you just hired this person and you just hired that person. Good. So now we have to make sure your contracts are straight so that we protect the intellectual property. But it's like you see people grow into their own ecosystem. Oh
Right.
my goodness. That is a fantastic thing. I absolutely love it. Yeah.
That's what I love the most too, is like, I mean, literally, genuinely, like seeing people grow, and like you said, like because I felt like Sydney, like she was a large part of the reason why we have like our agency, the F State today, is because she was on board when we were doing the magazine process. She's like, hey, I think you should consider this, and not that I hadn't considered it before, but just the fact that someone else believed in me enough to re-suggest something that I was already like mulling over and mulling around
Mhm.
is really amazing. And to see the fact that that person is still with us, here today, and seeing their growth of what they're doing and some of the things that they've been able to do is like mind blowing and very fulfilling to be a part of like their journey and process.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we're all paddling. It's like we're all trying to get to a similar destination. We have like different paddles, right? Like
Right.
somebody's over here, somebody's over here, somebody's moving debris out of the way, somebody's navigating up front. Like we're all a part of like the same thing. And so yeah, that's definitely a driver for me. Same people.
Well, I have one more question before we conclude and close. What is your
You
best?
mean we can't talk about this all day? I know we have to wrap it
I was
up.
like, I could, but time limit. So, what is your one piece of advice for those people? Because I know something that I've felt personally going through my life's journey is I've been through the time where we hit those lows where we're really, depressed, and we've gone through, for me personally, even to the point of like suicidal depression. And so, for
Mm-hmm.
my question is like, what for a person that has had that gusto, that gumption, and that ability to overcome those challenges, like what's one piece of advice that you would give someone to during those times to move forward and just to continue on to knowing that there's something better for them?
That's a great question. In that I I have this passion and drive for what I do, but that's not because I haven't met resistance.
Right.
So I told you I moved back to Texas in 2013, and I moved back home partly because I wanted to, but partly because I felt a strong desire to do so. Well, what happened in 2015 changed my life, and that's the death of my only sibling and younger brother, who passed away at the age of 29 at work, overworking himself in the entertainment industry,
Mm.
trying to make a way for himself. And like I said, he was 29, and like that changed everything. It pushed me in the direction that I'm in more than anything, though. It pushed me into, okay, life is literally short. You need to do the thing that you are passionate about. So that really pushed me into the direction I'm in now. I probably would have I probably would have continued to develop more skills by doing other things longer. But when something like that happens, you just have to stop and take inventory of what it means. So I was pushed in the direction that I'm in now. At the same time, that event really helped crystallize in my mind just I won't say the fragility of life, but I will express it as in the gift
Mm.
of life and the time that you have. And no matter for me how difficult things may be, or how just there's so many things that happen on a daily basis. I mean, people can literally get on your nerves to the point where you're just like, I'm just gonna sit in my house and not even talk to anybody.
Right.
Um, my personality, I would say probably leading up to my brother's death, I was prone to melancholy. I was one of those like little solemn kids. I mean, I was the same as I am now, very expressive, but I could just really get in the corner and read a book all day. If it came down to it. So I was prone to melancholy, had dealt with bouts of depression like all along, just from different traumatic things that happened to me in my childhood. So I think that's similar to a lot of people. And sometimes it comes upon you
Right,
in ways that can just really take you under. But going through the grieving process with the loss of my brother helped me actually utilize tools for grieving. I utilize those same tools to overcome bouts of depression when they try to sneak up on me. And that was just such a ripping apart of life as I knew it that I was kind of forced into that space. But at the end of the day, no matter what's going on, the fact that you open your eyes in the morning, you're able to, as the old folks say, you have the activity of your limbs. You're able to get out of bed and put your feet. You know, one thing I do, I get up in the morning and when I plant my feet on the ground, I just send up thanks and gratitude, right? Because
right,
that literally didn't have to happen.
right.
And yeah, so losing my brother at that age under those circumstances, especially since he was in entertainment, he was in radio and television, film, radio industry focused, and he passed away at work, working 2 or 3 jobs, trying to make ends meet to do the thing that he loved. So
Yes,
it's also a privilege for me to do the thing that I love. And so
right.
I just take all of that information together. I don't have like a 5-step plan or a 3-step or whatever. Maybe I
Right.
should think about it more and put pen to paper and come up with some little rubric. But it's all of those things put together. Whenever I'm feeling like just grief, that's the word I'll use. I use the tools that I was exposed to and cultivated while grieving the loss of my brother, which is an ongoing thing, right?
Right.
There are times where I still pick up my phone. I'm like, I'm gonna text my brother. Oh wait, he's not here.
Mm,
That was 2015. That's
right.
a real thing.
Right.
It can also be applied to grieving the loss of all kind of things, like maybe the loss of a relationship, loss of a marriage, loss of a child, loss of a dream, loss of a job, loss of a contract. I'm not trying to put them in a hierarchy, but there's so many things that you can encounter that are just things that you need to grieve.
Right.
So for anyone who is in that space, it may be helpful to actually look at how to grieve the loss, especially if it's a loss driven kind of depression. There's a way to grieve, there's steps, there's things that you can do that has just been helpful for me. So I just deploy it whenever I start to feel something like that. But yeah, there's resistance for sure. Oftentimes, if they as the scripture says, it is darkest often before dawn, right?
Right.
That's a saying that's in every culture. There's some kind of variation of that, and that's true. Right before, there's many times right before I've signed like an amazing client, something I would just say ignorant would happen,
Right.
dealing with something else, just some random thing. And it's like literally the day before I start working with someone that is amazing, or I'm working on a project that I really love. So there will be resistance, but there are actually tools, things that you can do to get past it. So that's what I would say. Learn the steps. I think there's 8 steps of grieving, but yeah, there's a lot of information out there about it. And that's been helpful to me.
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
was gonna say like it's so funny that you mentioned like there's always like that I guess shade of darkness before the light and I recently had quite a few things happen and I was telling one of our citizens, which is what we call our models, I was like, hey, like, ironically, these things that happen, and while most people would be upset, I'm actually like happy about it because it means something really big is
Yes.
about to happen around the bend and is around the corner. So,
Yes.
in my younger years, I used to get like really, of course, usually angry and frustrated, and go through all these different emotions. But as I've become, as I've grown more, let me say that I don't want to date myself as I've grown more.
Right.
Through experience, I've learned to readjust and to understand that there's something better that is coming after that particular test or time period.
Hmm.
But what I want to say to you in closing is thank you so much for your time. Tell everyone where they can learn more about you and where they can locate you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is my last name. So it's www.goodsonlaw.co. So .co, not .com. You can go to my website there. You can also email me. I am in at info@goodsonlaw.co. And you can follow me on Instagram at Goodson Law without the CO, just at Goodson Law. And you'll see my link throughs there. Well, yeah, yeah, it was so great visiting with you, and I thank you so much for the opportunity to just share a little bit of my journey and just my love for fashion law and this industry and for creative. So,
My
as you know, I could talk about this all day.
I mean, well, you helped me, and as much as I want to keep it to myself, I guess it's only right that I share you with the rest of the world. Well, thank you again so much, Sammetria.
Absolutely, thank you. All right, bye.
Bye.